So I wanted to make time to make sure that we have Peter Mathews, Professor Peter Mathews, our commentator from Cypress College, because Peter, you wrote this op-ed, "Dollars and Democracy," and you say it's not necessarily for everybody. Tell me the headline and what you feel is the first and most important point to make.
Well, the first one is that we have the best Congress money can buy. Like Will Rogers once said, unfortunately, at all levels of government, local, state, and federal, big lobbyists and wealthy donors have essentially bought a whole lot of influence, Dave, and that's why small business has such a hard time making it, while the biggest businesses are able to get breaks from the government. That's the problem.
Now, since you touched on that subject, and I want to let you continue your line of thought because you wrote the document, but I cannot help but think that on a day like today, when people are scratching their head about what do we do after Santa Monica, and I keep saying you have a voice with Congress. Right now, that voice is muffled because they can't hear us through all the dollar bills that are being shoved at them.
That's right. The gun manufacturing industry, as well as the NRA, has put in millions of dollars into congressional campaigns. That's why we couldn't even get a background check passed in Senate.
That was the point. That was the point. And then we also hearing that they're looking at cutting social programs like food stamps that people really need. So let's follow your line of thought, because I know that you've interviewed specific individuals whose life experience affirms what you're saying. Tell me about that.
Oh, absolutely. Because the wealthy lobbyists from the health insurance industries and the HMOs gave so much money to Congress over the last 20 years, we couldn't get a comprehensive health care system in this country. And people like my friend, he became my friend, and Frank Greenthaller, you might be able to talk to him here.
Yes.
He was a young man who suffered, by a medical condition, and then he went to a hospital, and they didn't treat him properly. They sent him from a public back to a public hospital and from the private one, and he'll tell you the story. He ended up with $20,000 debt, and that debt was a mark against his credit, which made him impossible for him to go for his career that was chosen to be a police officer. That stood against him. He had all the other qualifications. He'll tell you all about it if you get a chance to talk.
Yeah, and we're trying to get him. We're trying to get him on. But as you're telling me the story, it's the old thing about for want of a nail, goes the horseshoe, and there goes the horse, and there goes the battle. But I want to come back to your point, which is, here's a young man who wasn't asking for a handout. He wanted to be a law enforcement officer.
Yes.
Has an episode, has a critical emergency, bleeding intestine, rushes to the nearest hospital. They tell him it's going to be a bunch of money. Mm-hmm. He then decides he's going to a county facility because he couldn't afford that money. And because he still got hit with a $20,000 bill, you say he got disqualified from his dream of being in law enforcement because of what he owed.
That's right, because that went on his credit report, and law enforcement is very strict about that. And that's a shame, because I know Frank, and he would have made a great law enforcement officer. He wanted to also become a forensic psychologist to go one step ahead and help the law enforcement community. He couldn't do it. So he'll be talking to you later. That's one example. Another one was Breanna Lane, a 22-year-old Utah woman, a waitress, who was in an accident, lost part of her skull in the accident. The ambulance comes and picks her up and her skull, takes her to the hospital, and the doctor and the hospital couldn't agree who was going to pay the bill, so they didn't even give her any surgery. They sewed her scalp back on her head, left her brain loose for 3 months. 3 months. This is horrible. It's very shocking, but it needs to be out there. And for 3 months, she walked around with a horrible headache. And finally, when the newspaper got a hold of the story, the AP printed the story, then the doctors and the hospital got together and said, no, we got to take care of this young lady. We don't care about the money. We're going to give her surgery. And they put her back, the part of her skull back on. And she was still in horrible pain. Who should have to even go through that?
No one. Not in America, not
That's
now.
That's the special interest control of our elected officials. Not all of them. Some of them are very good people. Senator Wellstone refused money from corporate lobbyists, and he got elected.
Very few, and even more dwindling. Okay, now Friday night, people are going into the weekend. They want to have something positive. Look, Peter, I've talked with you often about this, and it's this. We get the jobs report out this morning. Yep. 175,000 jobs. Sounds like a lot, but not when you take a whole country into consideration. Yet, I'm not trying to dog the administration. What is keeping the economy still from being able to spark back to life more fully?
It goes back to small business investment again, and also bringing back some of the public sector to put money in people's hands. And that's going to take public spending from the government And for that, they have to close the corporate tax loophole, which they're not doing because they're afraid their donors will not like it. Like, when big companies like the oil companies and Facebook would pay with no taxes at all.
Right.
Loopholes. But let me give you another figure here real quickly. In this last election, Dave, in 2012, presidential and congressional spending in the campaigns, the donors to those campaigns put up $6.2 billion.
When I saw your number, I couldn't believe it. $6.2 billion.
A huge amount of money to buy people in high levels of office and power. And that's the regular American people can't afford to give that kind of money. It's the top 0.5% of 1% that donate to these campaigns, and that's why they get most of what they want. And the regular folks like small business, working people, teachers, firefighters, those folks don't get to have jobs. They don't get the chance to make more jobs for other people, and that's a problem for our system. Not to mention broken schools that have to be fixed, unaffordable college tuition. Don't forget cutting Social Security.
Stand by, Professor. Stand by. We've got Frank on the line. Frank, welcome to the conversation. Frank Greenthaller, I appreciate you taking time to be with us. I've only got a couple of minutes left, but Frank, how significant was this life course change that you had to take because of something that was unexpected, not your fault, but it changed your dream? It didn't come to fruition the way you had hoped.
Oh, it was quite significant. It was, as you said, completely unexpected, and the fact that I didn't have any kind of insurance or anything to help, and I felt like I was just kind of bounced around from one point of the system to the other. It just really kind of wrecked everything. And
now,
that
Frank,
seemed to be
has this made you more of an advocate for change? Has this made you could we say the lining might be that you're here talking to other people about what you went through, where you might have gone your whole life and never ever been willing to speak out?
Oh, well, certainly. I mean, when you go through things like that, you're not the only one. So it's essential that people are made aware of just how impactful these things are on people's lives in order to help them overall make the change. I mean, it's going to take the voices to make the change.
Frank, we had a shooting in Santa Monica, as you know. I don't know where you're located, but you could have been a good cop to help us out in a situation like that, huh?
Exactly.
Frank Greenthaller, thank you for taking time to join us on this Friday afternoon. Have a wonderful weekend.
No problem. You too, you as well.
Professor, as we wrap this up, 30 seconds, can we make change by getting more engaged, yes or no?
Absolutely, yes. And it takes grassroots effort. It takes people on your radio on the other side of the line there to get out there, call their members of the House and the state legislators, and tell them we're registered to vote and we're on to them. We can't let the big guys buy them out.
I got to run. We're on to them. I love that. Professor Peter Mathews, Cypress College, always leaving me with something to think about.
Your voice, KTLK AM 1150, where listening is a virtue.